I caught my wife and her lover in my bed, just hours after they filed a lawsuit against me. What happened next was unbelievable. Hey Reddit, I am Ethan, 34, stumbled into the kind of betrayal I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. Now I'm holed up in my dad's old fishing cottage, grappling with a tidal wave of emotions, rage, heartbreak, humiliation, and disbelief. My life, as I knew it, has collapsed, leaving me standing in the rubble of what was once my marriage. I'm a construction worker specializing in demolition, which often means extended trips away from home. This time, I was meant to be gone for 12 days, but the weather threw a wrench in the plans. Wet sites can't be demolished safely, so when the job stalled, I seized the chance to return home early. I wanted to surprise Anna. My plane landed at midnight, and I drove the 30 minutes to our secluded home, eager to see her face light up. But as I pulled into the driveway, my excitement turned to dread. A black SUV was parked in front of the house, one I didn't recognize. Given the remoteness of our home, Anna's fine during her real estate days, unexpected visitors were rare. My chest tightened as I stared at the car, 1,000 scenarios racing through my mind. Maybe it was a friend or a coworker. Maybe someone had car trouble and needed help. But deep down, I knew. Hoping against hope, I wedged my SUV close enough to block the other vehicle's driver's side, ensuring they couldn't leave without confronting me. I entered through the deck, careful to holster my legally carried handgun. It wasn't for my safety, I trusted my strength and training if things got physical, but to guard against doing something irreversible in a moment of rage. Inside, the house was eerily quiet. My steps echoed on the hardwood floors as I moved through the living room. The table was set for two, with the remnants of a meal still there. Dishes piled in the sink. It painted a picture I didn't want to see, a romantic dinner I hadn't been invited to. My heart sank further with every step toward our bedroom. The door was ajar, but the room was dark. I flipped on the bathroom light, casting enough of a glow to confirm my worst fears. There they were, Anna and a man I didn't recognize, tangled in our sheets, both naked and oblivious to my presence. The air seemed to leave the room. My chest felt like it had been crushed under a massive weight. I couldn't move for a moment, paralyzed by the realization that my life had just been ripped apart. Then, the anger came. It bubbled up, burning hotter with every breath. I pulled out my phone and began recording, circling the bed to capture every damning detail. This was my proof, the undeniable evidence of Anna's betrayal. As I filmed, the enormity of what this meant began to sink in. My marriage was over. The woman I had loved, trusted, and built a life with was now a stranger, her infidelity shattering every promise we had made. Worse still, the house, my pride and joy, the one I had built with my own hands, would likely have to be sold in the divorce. The thought of losing everything, because of her infidelity, was almost unbearable. I knew they were asleep, but I couldn't stand their peace while I was drowning in chaos. I fired 2 shots into the ceiling. The deafening noise jolted them awake. The man, John, as I would later learn, scrambled to cover himself with the sheets, while Anna stared at me, wide-eyed and panicked. She stammered, trying to explain, but her words were just noise. I silenced her with a shot into the closet door, splinters flying as I steadied my aim. I demanded to know the man's name. John, he muttered, his voice trembling. My eyes burned into Anna as I asked how long this had been going on. She lied, saying it was the first time, but John broke under pressure and admitted they'd been seeing each other for 6 months. 6 months. Half a year of betrayal, lies, and deceit. I wanted to know why. When did Anna stop loving me? Through her tears, she insisted she still loved me, but her words rang hollow. I fired 2 shots into the bathroom mirror on her side of the bed, the glass shattering in a cascade of broken promises. Turning to John, I grilled him about his family. Was he married? Did he have kids? He hesitated before admitting he had a wife and 2 children. My anger surged again. I thanked him, sarcastically, for showing me Anna's true colors before we had children, but I made it clear his actions had consequences. I told him he had 2 choices, confess everything to his wife, or I would. Either way, she would know the truth by the end of the day. Dragging John out of bed, I let my fists do some talking. By the time I was done, his nose and lip were bleeding. I gave him his clothes and shoved him out the door, warning him to leave immediately or risk being carried out by a coroner. Naked and terrified, he scrambled to his car and sped off, my threats echoing in his ears. Inside, Anna was sitting at the kitchen table, wrapped in a robe. She looked broken, but I felt nothing but contempt. I handed her phone to her and told her to call someone to pick her up. When she tried to argue, I cut her off. I wasn't interested in excuses or apologies. Our marriage was over, and she had no place in my home or my life anymore. She declined. I even suggested she call the police, but she refused. Perhaps she thought we could talk things through, that there might still be a chance for reconciliation. When she tried to speak, I cut her off, making it clear we were done, absolutely and irrevocably. I told her in no uncertain terms that this was no longer her home and that she needed to leave immediately. Whatever love I had for her evaporated the moment I found her in our bed with another man. There would be no forgiveness, no second chances. Anna's tears and pleas fell on deaf ears. When she started crying and begging for me to reconsider, I silenced her with 4 more shots, 2 into the oven, 2 into the refrigerator. Living more than 5 miles from the nearest neighbor has its advantages. No one heard a thing. I told her bluntly that I didn't care about life or death at that moment. Her actions had shattered me beyond repair, turning any love I had for her into an all-consuming hatred. If there were a way to erase her from my memory completely, I would have taken it in a heartbeat. Still sobbing, Anna stumbled to the garage as I instructed. I watched her through the window as she got into her car, barely able to see through her tears, and drove off into the night. That was 6 hours ago. I locked the doors, turned off the lights, and left the house. I couldn't stay there, not with the memories of what had just happened hanging in the air like a storm cloud. I drove aimlessly for a while, before deciding to head to my father's fishing cabin. It's a secluded place, barely used except for the occasional weekend getaway. Using the hidden spare key, I let myself in and found some solace in the silence. Once inside, I reached for the Glenlivet Scotch I'd bought for my father's birthday last month. Dad would be furious when he found out I'd touched his prized bottle, but I didn't care. Nothing seemed to matter anymore. I poured myself a drink, then another and another, until the warmth of the alcohol dulled the sharp edges of my thoughts. My mind raced, unable to settle on any one emotion or thought. I knew what I needed to do: divorce her. There was no going back. But how? Where do you even start when the person you trusted most has ripped your life apart? I've worked hard for everything I have. The house, my savings, my career, everything was built on the foundation of a life I thought we were building together. Now, it feels like all of it was for nothing. 7 years of marriage, reduced to ash. 7 years of loyalty and love, repaid with betrayal. It's almost enough to make a man lose his faith in everything. As I sit here, I can't help but wonder how this will all end. I've already decided to file for divorce, but I want it to go in my favor. I have the resources to hire a good lawyer, but I lack the energy and patience to deal with this nightmare. I don't even know how to pick one. Is there a Yelp for divorce attorneys? Can I trust anyone in a profession I've always viewed as corrupt? The thought of going back to that house makes my stomach turn. Every corner of it holds a memory, and now all those memories feel tainted. I don't know if I can ever step foot in it again. Maybe I'll sell it, let her take what she wants, and start over somewhere far away. But starting over feels impossible. How do you rebuild when the foundation is gone? As the scotch burns its way down, my thoughts grow darker. Part of me wishes I had ended it all right there, Anna, John, and myself. It would have been clean, decisive. But the other part of me knows that's just the alcohol talking. I still have a shred of hope, however faint, that there's a life for me beyond this mess. The weather is supposed to clear in a few days, which means I'll need to fly back to the work site. Maybe it's for the best. Being away from all of this might give me some clarity, Or maybe I'll stay there when the job is done, never coming back to this broken life. Tomorrow, I'll call my parents. I don't know how to explain what's happened, but I need them now more than ever. For tonight, though, I'll try to sleep, hoping that somehow, in the morning, the pain will feel a little less raw. Update. Apparently, my actions that night were excessive, at least, according to the law. This update will likely satisfy those who thought I took things too far. I've been arrested and charged with felony assault, making threats, and assault with a deadly weapon, among other charges. If convicted, I could face over 25 years in prison. The irony isn't lost on me. If I'd actually shot Anna and John in a fit of rage, I might be looking at a lighter sentence. John, instead of confessing to his wife, went straight to the police. He admitted to being caught with a married woman but somehow managed to play the victim. The deputy who took his statement was the same officer who arrested me the next day. I went peacefully, knowing resistance would only make things worse. I've had to tell my employer about the charges, and as a result, I'm now out of a job. My specialized role made replacing me difficult, and after 2 weeks of scrambling, they decided it was easier to let me go. This has complicated everything, including finding legal representation. To make matters worse, I was served divorce papers 2 days ago. Anna is going for everything she can, and while I haven't read her texts or listened to her voicemails, it's clear she's trying to paint herself as the victim. I hate her with every fiber of my being, but I'm too exhausted to fight back right now. I'm staying with my parents, who have been nothing but supportive, but there's only so much they can do. The criminal charges have taken priority, leaving the wreckage of my marriage on the back burner. My life, as I knew it, is over. All that's left is to survive whatever comes next. She declined. Even when I suggested calling the police, she refused, perhaps clinging to the hope we could talk it out. When she tried to speak, I cut her off. There was nothing to discuss. I made it crystal clear, we were done, absolutely and irrevocably. She no longer had a place in my life, in our home, or in my heart. Her actions had erased any love I once felt for her, leaving only bitterness and contempt. She began to cry and apologize, her pleas tumbling out between sobs, but I silenced her with a cold glare and a few more shots, this time into the oven and fridge. The sound of shattering metal and plastic echoed through the house. Living miles from the nearest neighbor has its advantages. No one heard a thing. I told her, in no uncertain terms, that I didn't care whether I lived or died anymore. Her betrayal had broken me beyond repair. With tears streaming down her face, she stumbled toward the garage. I watched through the window as she got into her car and drove off into the night. It was over. At least, that's what I told myself as I stood there, surrounded by the ruins of the life I thought I had built. That was 6 hours ago. I locked the doors, turned off the lights, and left. I couldn't bear to stay in that house a moment longer. The memories of what had just happened were suffocating. I drove aimlessly for a while, before heading to my father's fishing cabin. It's a secluded place, nestled in the woods, where I hoped to find some semblance of peace. Using the hidden spare key, I let myself in and poured a drink from the Glenlivet scotch I'd given him for his birthday. He'd be furious when he found out I'd touched it, but I didn't care. Nothing seemed to matter anymore. The scotch burned as it went down, dulling the edges of my thoughts, but not enough to make the pain disappear. I knew what I needed to do, file for divorce. There was no going back. But the idea of navigating this nightmare was overwhelming. How do you even start to dismantle the life you've built with someone? A life that, as I now realized, had been based on lies. 7 years. 7 years of marriage gone in an instant. It felt like a colossal waste of time, a cruel joke played at my expense. How could I have been so blind? How could she have done this to me? I knew I needed a lawyer, but I didn't even know how to begin looking for one. Was there a Yelp for divorce attorneys? I needed someone ruthless, someone who could help me get through this mess, with as little damage as possible. The thought of going back to that house made me physically ill. I couldn't live there, not after what had happened. But I didn't want her to have it, either. she didn't deserve it. Part of me wanted to pack up and leave, to start over somewhere new. Another part of me felt paralyzed by the enormity of it all. How do you rebuild when the foundation has been destroyed? As the hours dragged on, I alternated between despair and rage. One moment, I wanted to curl up and disappear, the next, I wanted to destroy everything in sight. The scotch wasn't helping as much as I'd hoped. Sleep felt like an impossible dream. When I finally did drift off, it was fitful and brief. I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing incessantly. I didn't bother checking who it was. I knew it wouldn't be anyone I wanted to hear from. Update. Apparently, my actions that night were excessive, at least in the eyes of the law. I've been arrested and charged with multiple offenses, including felony assault and assault with a deadly weapon. If convicted, I could face over 25 years in prison. The irony is not lost on me. Had I actually shot them, I might be facing a lighter sentence. John, the man I caught with my wife, went straight to the police instead of confessing to his wife. He admitted to being caught with a married woman but somehow managed to play the victim. The deputy who took his statement was the same officer who arrested me the next day. I went peacefully, knowing resistance would only make things worse. My employer found out about the charges, and I've been let go. It's understandable, given the circumstances, but it's yet another blow in an already devastating situation. Finding legal representation has been challenging, but I've managed to hire a defense attorney who is competent in my case. To make matters worse, Anna has served me with divorce papers. She's clearly going for everything she can, and while I haven't responded to her texts or calls, I know she's trying to position herself as the victim. My parents have been incredibly supportive, but this ordeal is taking a toll on them as well. I've overheard my mother crying more than once, and my father, usually stoic, looks like he's aged a decade in the past few weeks. They shouldn't have to worry about their son facing prison time in their retirement years. I'm stuck in limbo, waiting for the next blow. The criminal charges, the divorce, the loss of my job, it's all too much. I haven't even begun to process the betrayal. The idea of trusting another woman, let alone dating, is laughable. Right now, I just want to survive this nightmare. Latest update. My lawyer managed to get the charges dropped. During a hearing, she presented the footage I had taken of Anna and John. It turned out that John hadn't realized I had evidence or had forgotten about it. When he refused to testify, the case against me collapsed. His decision was likely influenced by the fact that his father is a retired judge and he owns a business. He couldn't risk the footage becoming public. I'm relieved to avoid a trial, but the damage has already been done. I've lost my job, my marriage, and the life I thought I had. Now, I'm shifting my focus to the divorce. I've hired a top-notch attorney, and I'm determined to ensure Anna doesn't walk away with everything. She destroyed our marriage, and she doesn't get to keep the house or the life we built together. I don't know what the future holds, but for now, I'm taking it one day at a time. I'm trying to find a new job, trying to rebuild. It's not easy, but I have to believe that there's a way forward. I have to believe that this isn't the end. Looking back now, I see how utterly blind I was. I thought I knew her, thought I understood the woman I had chosen to spend my life with, but it's painfully clear now that I didn't. Realizing that I acted like a complete fool over someone who turned out to be a stranger to me is deeply unsettling. If you ever feel the urge to lash out or lose yourself in anger, make sure it's for someone who truly loved and valued you, not for someone who lied and never cared. Losing your mind over someone like that isn't worth a single punch, let alone something irreversible. Trust me, I've lived it, and I can tell you it's never worth it. Honesty, both with yourself and the people around you, could prevent so much pain. My soon-to-be ex-wife keeps trying to reach out to me, sending messages and leaving voicemails, but that ship has long since sailed. She made her decision when she betrayed me, and there's no going back. I'm done being her safety net or fallback option. What I need now is a fresh start. Somewhere far enough from my parents that I can carve out my own space, but close enough that I can visit them without too much trouble. I've never been fond of big cities, but small towns have their drawbacks too. Still, the idea of starting over somewhere new has never felt more appealing. I don't know where I'll go yet, I just know I can't stay here. One thing I'm incredibly grateful for is that we didn't have children. As devastating as this situation is, it would have been infinitely worse if kids were involved. Cutting ties with her is a relief, it's a clean break with no permanent connections to keep us tethered together. I still want children someday, but only with someone I can trust completely, someone who understands loyalty. Knowing that I can rebuild my life and my career from scratch is a small comfort. I'm at rock bottom right now, but the freedom to start fresh gives me hope. I can leave her behind as a mistake, a tragic chapter in my life, and move forward. Therapy is definitely in the cards. I've already set up my first counseling session in 2 weeks. I know I'll have to confront my anger head-on, but I'm ready for that. I need someone to help me process everything and rebuild the pieces of my life. What I did was wrong, and I fully own that. I can't change the past, but I can improve and move forward. When our lawyers started communicating, her team kept pushing for a face-to-face meeting. I refused at first, but my lawyer pointed out that I'd eventually have to face her in court, so it might be better to get this over with sooner rather than later. They knew we had evidence of her infidelity, but they hadn't seen it yet. My lawyer suspected they had a strategy in mind and wanted to understand their angle, so reluctantly, I agreed to the meeting. We met in the conference room at my lawyer's office. I was already seated when she arrived with her lawyer. The moment she saw me, she started crying and moved toward me as if expecting some sort of reconciliation. I told her to stay back, which only made her cry harder. I stepped back, and that seemed to stop her approach. I'll spare you the exact details, but I unleashed every vile thought I had about her, every ounce of anger and resentment I had bottled up since that night. I let her know exactly how deeply she had hurt me and how much I despised her for what she'd done. Her lawyer looked utterly shocked, and even mine seemed taken aback. But I didn't care. She needed to hear it. After a break to collect ourselves, she spoke. She apologized profusely and admitted that she had hoped I'd forgive her, but after what I said, she realized that was never going to happen. Then she shifted the conversation to something I hadn't anticipated, the potential value of our land. Apparently, a major corporation was interested in purchasing a large portion of property in our area, including ours, for development. She explained that our land was strategically located near an airport, a major highway, a power plant, and a water source, making it critical to the deal. She needed my permission to sell it. I interrupted, pointing out that if I'd been incarcerated, she could have sold it without me. Her lawyer's expression confirmed that I was right. Then she admitted something that made my blood boil. She had advised John not to press charges against me. Hearing that nearly made me lose control again, but I held it together. She revealed that John had been the agent facilitating the deal. He stood to profit significantly from the sale, as would we if it went through. According to her, his family connections in government and real estate made him the perfect middleman. She explained that the two of them had been working together to secure the necessary properties for the sale and that our land was a key piece of the puzzle. The revelation disgusted me even further. I handed my phone to her lawyer and played the video I had taken of her and John. Watching their reaction was grimly satisfying. She was silent, clearly understanding the leverage I held. I questioned whether greed had motivated her infidelity, and she admitted that it had played a role. Her confession only deepened my resentment. Despite the potential financial windfall, the thought of her benefiting from it turned my stomach. They started coordinating with the locals and planning the transaction, and then about 6 months before I discovered the affair, they crossed the line into a physical relationship. She claimed it was just the excitement of the deal that led them there and insisted it was purely physical, with no emotional attachment. I struggled to keep my temper under control. When I asked if they used protection, she admitted they did at first, but later relied solely on her birth control pills. I couldn't contain my outrage. I shouted, pointing out how a man's fluids can remain inside a woman for up to 6 days. The thought of what she might have exposed me to made me feel physically ill. I asked her how she would feel if I visited a prostitute, then touched her mouth with the same hands. Graphic, yes, but equivalent to what she had done to me. She tried to say she showered after being with him, but I told her unless she had done a full internal cleanse, it didn't matter. My disgust was evident. She asked why I looked at her with such contempt. The answer was simple, because she had disgusted me. She had exposed me to risks without my consent, and the thought of her intimate acts with John made my skin crawl. As far as I was concerned, John could have her, she was tainted with his filth now. I couldn't stand being in the same space anymore, so I left and got drunk for the first time since retreating to my dad's cabin. Ironically, I should feel pleased about the potential land deal. If it goes through, I'll have enough money to pay my lawyers, repay my parents generously, and start over with a significant amount left over. But the conditions attached to securing that money make me feel even sicker than my wife does. 3 lawyers drafted an agreement. My lawyer and hers hammered out a $5,050 divorce settlement. The divorce can't be finalized until the land either sells or the deal collapses, but our marriage is already dead. I'm not in a rush to be single or remarry, but staying legally tied to her in any way feels like an insult. I'm barred from contacting John's wife or showing the video evidence to her family. My ex has already told her parents we're divorcing and admitted to the affair, but they don't know the full story. I managed to get my job back and will be starting at a new location next week. There's also talk of sealing the charges John filed against me, which would keep my record clean. Still, I'm reeling from her excuses and her dismissive attitude about everything. Even though I was away for 10 days at a time, I never suspected a thing. Our sex life was normal, which now feels like a cruel irony. At least people in sexless marriages don't have to worry about this kind of betrayal. The idea of her kissing me after being with John feels like an ultimate violation. People like her and John don't seem to grasp the depth of their betrayal. I can only imagine John continued his normal sex life with his wife during their affair. Does she even realize that, indirectly, she might have been intimate with my wife? Knowing what I know now, I'm glad I punched John in the mouth, though I'm relieved I didn't take things further. Both of them are revolting, like licking a hobo's backside in a filthy alley. The thought of how she could willingly go back and forth between 2 men is beyond my understanding. Over the years, I had plenty of chances to cheat but never did, out of loyalty and basic decency. The idea of being with someone who might have been with others recently is insane to me. Condoms aren't foolproof, they break and don't protect against everything. Truly safe sex only exists in monogamy, but it only works if both partners are faithful and haven't been promiscuous. If the land sale goes through, I could end up better off financially, but it'll take time. For now, I'll keep working as I always have, but I won't have a home to return to. She can stay in the house until it sells and cover all the expenses. The house will be demolished after the sale since most of the land is undeveloped, and moving the house isn't an option. When I need to sign any paperwork, I'll be notified. After that, our paths will part faster than her legs for a $100 bill. She ruined me, and it's not fair. Just being associated with her has tainted me. She exposed truths I didn't want to face. Not every woman is like her, and not every man is like John, but people like them ruin it for the rest of us. Why is it that 2 loyal people with a strong bond rarely seem to find each other? Almost every story I read is about a decent person who ended up with a scumbag and the fallout from that bad decision. I can't even fathom trusting someone again, let alone wanting to. No one is worth the pain she caused me, and she definitely wasn't. It infuriates me that John will likely get away with everything, though I hope karma catches up to him eventually. I don't see the need for another update. She and I will divorce, the money will be split, and I'll never see or speak to her again. That's how it ends, even if it's indefinitely on hold. To those who supported me and urged me to stay strong, thank you. Your advice meant more than you know. To those who suggested I end it all, go eat a sock. I'll respond to a few comments over the next day or 2, then probably fade away. I wish healing to everyone who's been cheated on, just as I wish it for myself. As for the land sale, it's likely to happen around April or May. The real estate agent handling it has cleared most of the hurdles. By the time construction starts, I'll have my money and won't care. The process is moving quickly, and my wife still tries to reach out with calls and texts, but I ignore her every attempt. I can't believe she ever genuinely cared about me. Her ability to degrade herself for someone else's pleasure is incomprehensible to me. It disgusts me that I respected her body more than she did, but that's irrelevant now. I'm done with relationships. There's no way I could bring a child into the world with anyone after her betrayal. While I still want kids, I'm considering surrogacy after the land sale. Given her infidelity, the only potential contribution she could have made was children. These days, women don't need men to have kids, and I don't need an unfaithful partner to start a family. Through surrogacy, I can raise my children with the morals and ethics she clearly lacked. Her actions proved she could never be a good wife, and she'd undoubtedly be a terrible mother. God help any child she brings into this world.